So hello everyone, welcome to the meeting about the meaning of international solidarity. This webinar is organized by Revolutionaire Einheid and we're very happy that everyone is joining us tonight. Tonight we'll be speaking Mohammed Khatib from Samidoun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network and Yasmin Ahmed from Revolutionaire Einheid and the International League of People Struggles. I will just admit some other people. Yes, so about the structure of the night, we are very glad that Mohammed and Yasmin will join us. I will give a short introduction and after that I will give the floor to Mohammed and Yasmin and they will give an introduction on what their vision on the meaning of international solidarity is. And after this, I have prepared some questions, but like I am much more looking forward to seeing questions or contributions coming in from all of you, everyone who is participating tonight. So please leave in the chat any questions that you have for Mohammed or Yasmin tonight, or if you want to share something yourself by saying something, please let me know so I can unmute you and give you the floor. So the webinar tonight is about international solidarity, and during this unfolding international crisis, international solidarity seems to be more important than ever. We see that the capitalist and the imperialist institutions are cracking down more on people movements, on imprisoned people. I think everyone has seen that last week was the Palestinian prisoner campaign, and because the prisoners right now, they face intensified repression in the prisons. And this is true everywhere. If we look at workers, for example, in the Philippines, but also in our own countries, workers getting fired with massive numbers, they are not getting the same benefits and the help that the big companies are getting. So we want to ask the questions, especially in this time, how can we effectively practice international solidarity and how we can, and also look back on how international solidarity has developed over the past years. Now this webinar is organized by Revolutionaire Einheid and I just want to share a couple of the things that we have done as well on this front. Because we strive in our work to work as close as possible with international friends and comrades. Because even though we realize that, of course, in every country there are specific particularities in the struggle, our international connection is always at the forefront of the work and always comes through in the struggles that we are fighting, for the simple reason that also the enemies are connected very much. And this is an important reason why we should be connected as well. So for example, in the past years, we have organized solidarity delegations to Palestine, to Kurdistan, and to the Philippines. And in the Netherlands, we try to incorporate these visits and these solidarity campaigns when we do work on the international political prisoners. For example, George Ibrahim Abdallah, who is in prison now for 35 years in French jails. He is a struggler for Palestine. Or the Palestinian student prisoners who are facing at this moment difficult times where they are getting repressed heavily by the prison authorities. And also recently we saw that in the Greek prisons, actually they are stepping up their repression of Turkish and Greek comrades who have been arrested in Athens. So to not hold you up any longer with me talking and give the floor to Mohammed, we are very happy that you are joining us, Mohammed. I hope that you can hear me because your screen. Yes, you're back.
I'm happy to hear you too.
So yeah, welcome very much, Mohammed. I mean, we are working with each other for a long time now with Revolutionaire, Einheid and Samidoun. Yeah, please, if you want to introduce maybe yourself more and also the work of Samidoun and your vision, of course, on the international solidarity.
Okay. Thank you first for the invitation, Thomas, and for RE, especially as an organization thinking within this situation about the revolutionary response and where and how we understand the question of solidarity. I hope you all feeling good and safe within this situation and everything going on. It's a very big question, and I know I don't have too much time, and I will start to introduce myself by answering a little bit about the question. So my name is Muhammad Khatib. I was born in Al Halwi refugee camp in Lebanon. I am originally from Al Huli, which is a small village in the north of Palestine. Al Malaha, which is in Sahl Al Huli Valley, which was occupied in 1948. In my small family in Al Halwi camp, I will talk a bit about my aunt. She is a Palestinian woman, was involved with the women committees, belonged to the DFLP, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And she was arrested in the 82 when the Israeli Zionist occupation invaded Lebanon. After she was liberated, she was arrested for 2 years, I think. Then she was married to a Tunisian comrade, her comrade. He was fighting in Lebanon for the liberation of Palestine, and he was with the DFLP. So I grew up in a family that in this small, isolated, sieged camp. I was born in the 90s, so after, before Oslo, a little bit. So with this difficult situation, I grew up that there is a Tunisian man, he lives in this camp and he's part of our family. So he was part of our small family, but then he learned that he was part of our big family and big struggle. And he came for a practical solidarity act. And within also our small family, there was another aunt, she was married to another Tunisian man, his name Abul Qasim, and he was a leader, command leader with the guerrilla in the south of Lebanon with the PFLP. So in the same camp, there was also, when I get organized, I joined the youth movement after the second Intifada. I start learning more that there's a Kurdish people living in the camp and they are part of the Palestinian resistance. There's one Iranian comrade who live in Mar Ilyas camp. He joined the Mar Ilyas camp in Beirut and he joined the resistance in the 70s and he settled until today in Mar Ilyas camp. So this, for me, it wasn't special, not because I'm special, but because I grew up within Palestinian society in Lebanon, has a history of resistance. And if we say I was born in 90, so 82 wasn't a far many years before after the Israeli occupation and all the history of resistance, Palestinian and Lebanese national resistance in Lebanon against Israel. So there we start to learn about Kozo Kutomoto, the Japanese struggler. He was part of the Palestinian resistance as well. I start learning about George Ibrahim Abdullah as he is isolated and arrested in France illegally. So from there, what I'm trying to say that this is also a culture, international solidarity, and when it comes to a practical revolutionary solidarity, it's always practical and always a direct act that it should be done. In the same time, I understand like the difference between when we speak about social movement, popular movement, and when we speak about revolutionary organizations working together with it. So I do believe that we have to think and to be in two fronts. First front, we have to think about this question, how we can answer it practically within the social movement as a wide movement. So in a practice, for example, we have in Palestine several organizations and in diaspora as well, who's working on the front of agriculture, of youth, of social and human rights, such as the women's rights, LGBT movement, whatever. This social movement, our role as a revolutionary organizations being part of this movement is to do and to use our capacity with our relation as a movement around the globe, around the world, who exist as a part of the history I was talking about in the 60s and 90s and 80s, and even goes beyond that. We have to play our role to do the direct connections and to build the direct relations and to push within this wider social movement for more radical radical action, and also radical political positions on the social questions. But on the same time, we have to think about the other front as our relationship as a revolutionary organizations around the world. I have to mention two experiences affected me a lot. First, as I work with Samidoun, and I'm doing the coordination work for Samidoun in Europe. This space allows me more also to get engaged with different organizations who support Palestinian political prisoners. And then I start learning that these organizations and this group are practicing this solidarity with Palestinian political prisoners because also they belong to a group and a political lines that used to be engaged with our struggle as a Palestinians. And with Samidoun, I have traveled to the Philippines for a 1 month almost a trip to be part of the ILPS conference. And then I stayed for 3 weeks where I visited different oppressed communities such as the indigenous community, displaced community, whatever. So there also I learned, for example, when I visited Mindanao, and I was in like very far village in the countryside, almost between the countryside and the jungle. I met a woman, she's a wife of martyr, a Filipino martyr who was organizing the health work committees in the Philippines are going to the countrysides and to the indigenous people to give them a medical aid from a revolutionary perspective. When she saw me, she cried and she said, "You are the second Palestinian I met after my husband was assassinated by the Filipino army. And the first Palestinian I met, he was Ahmed al-Muslimani. He's a Palestinian from Jerusalem, and he is the co-founder of the health work committees in Palestine." And before that, I thought that maybe I am the first Palestinian who came to Mindanao. I have been doing these meetings with these people, like as I am discovering something. And this was a very important shock for me because I am lucky enough or privileged enough to know about the history of Ahmed al-Muslimani, but I didn't know this part. So also here I saw my trip as a part of this history of relationship, and I saw how we as Samidoun can work more to relate or to bring up back this history and to do the connection as a part of our duty, let's say. And from here I can go because Thomas in the beginning gave me very good instructions how I should talk. So he helped me how to think. And part of what was written that there was a revolutionary solidarity movement, direct movement, especially between the 60s and the 80s. And from 90s until now, which is 30 years my age, we are living under the NGO, international relief work, and let's say the World Bank and imperialism and all of this. And I agree. And I think part of this because of the balance of power, but not because that there is no any revolutionary line, and also there is, and only there is this line, and we are living in a disaster. I think our role more as a revolutionary organization should be focused how we can work more on our power in different fronts, let's say. And from here, we have to have a very realistic revolutionary approach and way of thinking. And from here also we can see how we can benefit from the social movement that it's already exists and it's bigger than us, and we have to think how we can push forward within this movement, because I do believe that there is no radical change without a social movement, but in the same time revolutionary organization alone by ourselves, we cannot achieve this goal. And I think we are living in from this period of different balance of power, that we are living within the defensive role. And I think this is the role of the solidarity movement and the resistance movement. But as a revolutionary organizations, I think to change the balance of power, we have to think more on the offensive approach. First, to protect our community, and second, to protect ourselves and the movement as well. And I think here where we should focus more to play a role to connect revolutionary organizations around the world who are already exist. We all know that there is a revolutionary movement in Colombia. We all know that there is a big revolutionary movement in Philippines, in India, in Palestine, of course, in Lebanon, everywhere. Here we should think more how we can practice solidarity. We can focus, yes, and it's good to write statements, to express our political opinions on papers, in events. It's very good to use the coronavirus situation for more communication and to use social media and all means of communication. But I do believe also what Thomas mentioned, for example, RE as an example, building and sending delegations, building direct relations and living with the situation of the people. I do believe as well today the working class movement, the most oppressed people in the third world, so-called the third world, but let's say the most oppressed community from direct colonialism, we have another specific role as a solidarity movement and as revolutionary organizations in the West and living within the belly of the beast, let's say. So we have to think more strategically and in the means of tactics that how we can support and do our duties in regards of the liberation movement who exist under these colonies, which is, I do believe that, for example, if we take the Arab world or our region, I do believe all our region is still under colonialism. From Lebanon to Syria to Egypt to Morocco to even Algeria. Yes, there is a very different faces and ways of colonialism, but we still live under colonialism. So as we do exist, for me, for example, me in Belgium, I know very well the history of Belgium in relation to Congo and in relation to different, the history of colonies. But in the same time, I do know very well until today the role of Belgium in the occupation of Iraq, in bombing Syria, in funding the Zionist state of Israel. And at the same time, here comes the question of the Netherlands. Yes, there is a strong relationship with the state of Israel and with the Netherlands as a state and as a country, as a colonial imperialist power. We know that there is a very big economical interest in terms of agriculture, IT, and you can name it. We know the high number of investment, of Zionist investment in the Netherlands. So here comes our role if we think, for example, in the Netherlands within the social movement. There is a lot of solidarity and progressive Dutch organizations working on the agricultural level. I think our role, for example, as Samidoun or RE, is to connect these organizations with the agricultural committees and organizations working back home in Palestine and in the countries where we are working and we have relations there. There is very different organizations, for example, working on racism and social rights. We have to do this. But in the same time also, as RE, and as Samidoun, we have to think more where we can see our allies, let's say, yes, not only as comrades and friends who are joining in the movement, but where we do agree fully politically and we see our situation is, we believe that our situation is connected practically. Me as Palestinian, for example, I feel that I suffer from the Dutch role within the state of Israel. It's not just that I don't like it and I expect from them a positive position. When they are investing in Israel, every drop of money they are giving there, it's a drop of Palestinian blood. because they are investing on the existence of this Zionist colony in the Middle East. And this example goes on all imperialists, and especially Western European and American, the United States. So I think our role as a citizen of these countries is not just that we have to express our opinion regarding the our relation, or to express that our humanity in regards of different cases that goes on around the world, but we have to think internally and deeply about our involvement within this disgusting positions that our state is taking on behalf of us. If we believe that it's democratic or whatever state and it's elected by people, and if we believe that we are citizens, that we have to pay taxes, and with all this liberal debate. So I think there is another personal duty that should go here, our way of thinking and analysis, that we are part of this. It's not just we have to support them. It's not us and them. It's we are both on this front. Of course, we are not equal in this, but I think we are equal in the struggle, and this is where we become equal. We are equal when we are a part of the movement, when we became equal when we are sacrificing together, when we are ready to confront together, when we are ready to build this movement for real equality and justice together. And also this is what accounts for me, it's the practical actions and the practical way of approach of thinking, but also conducting this strategy and political line. For example, today, who's visiting the Palestinian camps in Lebanon? What we know about the situation of the Palestinians in Jordan who still live in this camp, suffers after the war of 67 or the ethnic cleansing in 1948. The blockade in Gaza. I know, for example, the Netherlands is investing a lot in IT in Gaza and having a relation with a lot of Gazanian committees. But in the same time, the Dutch state is funding the state of Israel, and this means they are funding the blockade of Gaza. So what they want to do is they want to invest in the blockade, but in the same time suck our blood and our people's skills for a very cheap price. And as a Palestinians, of course, we shouldn't allow this, and we have to confront it. But also, we cannot do it by ourselves alone. And I think we believe that it's a duty for the Dutch government to fight together with us on this front, because this is how we see our ongoing occupation, and this is how we be in the offensive together. Because the price of this is very heavy. It's a blockade of millions of people. It's millions of people are displaced and refugees. So I think the only way to build and to confront this heavy attack on our movement and our people, it's only by direct solidarity in a very revolutionary and realistic approach. Today in Palestine, tens of students are being tortured and arrested. We have more than 5,000 Palestinian political prisoners are arrested, not because they are bad people, and not because the Israeli occupation is happy to arrest them. I do believe the Zionist occupation, they are looking forward 5-star occupation without problems and conflicts and being on the media 24 hours. They like to do whatever they want in a smooth way. There is more than 5,000 Palestinian political prisoners, within them children and women, because they are in the first front of resistance. And they know that the resistance actions, whatever they are and in which front, if they are, it's in the university or in the street or an armed resistance act, they know that they are paying a price for that. The difference is those people are ready to sacrifice because of the heaviest occupation that they are living in, to struggle and sacrifice for a liberation. I think we have to radicalize ourselves more on this. We have to think more on our commitment for a change, not only on the question of solidarity, but how we can accomplish this change, and how and what is our level of commitment to this. because bringing a change or struggling for a change or for a revolution, this comes to the question: how many hours a day you are putting for this change? Not only what do you think and what do you believe. This is very important, but I think what you are doing is the most important. In which direct program to place this change you are involved. So I think I will stop on this. I hope I answered and I didn't take a lot of time, but I'm happy to answer any question and to hear Yasmin and others' opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I think that was very, very insightful for us. I'm just gonna give the floor to Yasmin, who is sitting right beside me. So I will just move up and give Yasmin the floor, and then we will come back with some round of questions. So if you have questions, please leave them in the chat or just send them to me personally.
Hello, everyone. Firstly, thank you, Thomas, for handing them over, and thanks, Mohammed, for that talk. I'm gonna try and add a bit more, but I think you were quite thorough in what you presented. So I think I'll also start off with telling you a bit about myself, to frame the conversation on international solidarity. So I'm Yasmin, as you know. I am based in the Netherlands, but I was born and raised in Ireland. I'm half Irish, half Pakistani. So there's already a bit of international solidarity going on. And growing up in Ireland, I grew up around a lot of solidarity with Palestine, because Ireland is still partly under British occupation. And there's in the 80s and the 70s and 80s, there was really strong connections, and there still is strong connections between the struggle of Irish people in the north and Palestinians. So when the second Intifada happened, when I was about 10, I was taken to demonstrations and saw this like international solidarity happening around me. Another example that I grew up around, that I grew up learning about international solidarity is, I guess, also with a boycott campaign, but the boycott for South Africa, against South African apartheid. There was a story that we learned a lot in school about Dunn Stores, which is a supermarket like Albert Heijn, or I don't know, I'm trying to see where people are from to give relevant, but a supermarket, a big supermarket that also had a shop, clothing store. And at the time in 1984, workers were under orders not to handle South African goods, and one 21-year-old woman refused to put through 2 grapefruits under the directive of her union, and walked out, followed by 8 other co-workers. And that turned into a 2-year battle with the supermarket and the workers. And at first they didn't get much support, but as the campaign went on and more started coming out of South Africa, that became a huge symbolic protest, but also an actual, there was an actual picket line. So I guess I grew up learning about international solidarity, being in the only country in Western Europe that's still under occupation. So so I had it as quite a model when I was growing up. So when I started getting into activism, it always made sense to be international solidarity always made sense to me. And I just want to talk a bit about, I guess, going back to my notes. The point that Mohammed was talking about the oneness in struggle, or being in the same struggle. I think this is a really crucial point, especially for solidarity between those in imperialist countries and those in not imperialist countries, because those under imperialism. I think often you can see a dynamic happening where, yes, it is like, I am doing solidarity for these oppressed people, and I should feel guilty for living with all this privilege in this imperialist center. But I think when you truly understand the relationship between where you like are and who you are in struggle with, and that it actually is the same struggle, it's all that you can stop having like reinforcing the dynamics of you, of like the dynamics of more a charity thing. And I think that it's really important to when we are being in solidarity with those in like across borders, you have to understand that, yes, you are maybe in a better position, but we must like really trust that you build like, I'm sorry, I'm a bit, I need to take a step back and explain this, what I want to say. Actually, you know what, I'm just going to go to my nice Rosa Luxemburg quote instead, because I think she really emphasizes the need, the imperative of international solidarity. And she writes in the her thesis on the tasks of international social democracy in 1915. She writes that the class struggle against ruling classes within the boundaries of bourgeois states and international solidarity of the workers of all countries are the true rules of life. So she goes on to say that yeah, there's no socialism without international proletarian solidarity, and there's no socialism without class struggle. The activity of the proletariat of all countries as a class in peacetime and as in wartime must be geared to fight against imperialism and war as its supreme goal. And for me, as an activist throughout my time, I think that these are the lessons that have been constantly learned, in that like we are in the same struggle against imperialism, no matter where we are. And I think we can analyze it and from our relation to it is very important. But understanding that we are equal in struggle and trying to build strong mutual relations with those that we are in solidarity with, learning from others, we can then apply those lessons to our own situation, and sometimes learn about our situation. When I'm also with RE is also a member of the International League of People's Struggle, and I attended the assembly in Hong Kong in last June. And honestly, it was like, for so many reasons, it was amazing, but to have people from all around the world gathered under the shared vision of a world free of imperialist war and domination, and like building socialism was really cool. But for me personally, I took part in one workshop where I spoke a bit about Palestinian political prisoners, and then after me there was a guy from Canada who was speaking about Irish political prisoners. And for me, this was really weird that that was the way it was, that I, as an Irish person, didn't actually know about like some of the things, the people that he was talking about, or the fact that I didn't even know that they still had the equivalent of administrative detention, like no charge and no trial. So it was a bit confronting at first, that I was like, oh, I should know all this, and also why are other people talking about this? And then I was like, oh, this is the whole point. International solidarity also allows us to hold up like it's like a reflect. It holds up a mirror to ourselves, and where we are at, and lets us learn about our the struggles that are happening in our own countries. And I think one of the things is, I, as an Irish person growing up in the 90s, was completely fed the ideas of the peace process, and disarmament, and had not learned any real alternative until I came into contact with people from other places. And I knew that I didn't know enough about this, but I think hearing other people from other places be in solidarity with Irish prisoners was a really different thing, and a very, very enlightening thing for me. So just to like go on a bit about international solidarity. I mean, Mohammed was talking about quite a few like strategies that we should use and try and build in really supporting and other struggles. And I think that this is true, and I just think that the basis of it must always be to, like, yes, building strong relationships and understanding the duty of answering when asked is another thing. Like, we are here to be asked to support things, and taking on tasks is an immensely helpful, like, taking on whatever is asked of you is really also becoming part of the one, like, part of the struggle. I have quite a few notes around me here. And I don't really have much else to say. I really believe in being part of like international formations as well, to coordinate and have that like large network. I mean, I can see some people from here are also from Canada, ILPS organizations and different things. So and it's really great to see people in international formations using that structure to build so much more than the structure itself is. And I really encourage everyone to, you know, join an international formation, join an organization if you're not in one, and just
join Samidoun if you
join Samidoun.
And RE as well.
Set up your own Samidoun chapter where you are.
And RE as well, if you are in the Netherlands.
Yeah, that too. I'm going to invite Thomas to come back and sit beside me, so that we can get into questions, because I think that's the more interesting thing.
Well, thank you, Yasmin, and thank you, Mohammed. Yes, so now we want to do a little bit of discussion, a little bit of question and answer. I see that question came in the chat as well, and I think maybe we can just jump to that one, because I think it's a very relevant question. So thank you, Tariq, for asking it. And the question is, what do you think the Netherlands can do in the case of Palestinian prisoners, and what can the role of grassroots movements be, like yours, in pushing the government to make any action towards this case? So maybe Mohammed or Yasmin, you want to go first to answer this question about what the Netherlands or our organizations can do for the Palestinian prisoners.
I mean, it's different what we mean by the Netherlands, as a state or as a people. So if it's as a state, I don't expect personally, or I believe as Samidoun, we expect anything from the Netherlands state. And they will never be in this position, and they cannot be. So they will not advocate for Palestinian political prisoners, of course. But and this is not our aim. But as a grassroots movement and as a social movement in general in the Netherlands, and such as Samidoun, for example, Yasmin can talk more about what we can do in the Netherlands. But I do believe that all grassroots organizations and solidarity organizations within the social movement in the Netherlands have to speak about political prisoners in Palestine, advocate for their liberation, for their rights, even when they are under prison, but always their liberation should be the main goal and goal. This is what I do. I do believe that we should do. And if the question more about how we as revolutionary organizations, what our role can be, and even if we go specific more within this Palestinian political prisoners movement, I think we can do a lot of this because our political prisoners, they come from different Palestinian social classes. Many of them are students, so I think we should more connect student unions and organizations in the Netherlands to speak up loudly about arresting political prisoners students, because I do believe also that the Netherlands state and any other imperialist state who have relation with Israel is using Israel as a laboratory zone, and of course they will implement or are already implementing the same methods that they are applying over Palestinian political prisoners on other political prisoners or just prisoners in the Netherlands and or around the world. So also this is part our conscious about the political prisoners, not only because we are in solidarity with Palestinian political prisoners, but because also we will face almost the same oppression that they are facing in this time or later, or we did face it. So it's a general movement, and always all around the globe, there is not only Palestinian political prisoners, but there is political prisoners in all around the world. So also our role is to connect all of these organizations to build a movement that work on political prisoners question as a daily case, not on such occasions when there is a hunger strike or something. Always like a call for the liberation of political prisoners should be on daily basis. In Europe, for example, we have a lot of political prisoners in Germany, in Greece, in France. We have George Brahim Abdullah. We have Kurdish comrades. We have Arabs comrades from Morocco, Tunisia, from different places. So and migrants and refugees who are in prisons and detentions, in detention centers or refugee camps, who are locked and becoming a new detention centers and concentration camps within the new right-wing and Nazi rising in Europe. So I think it's a very important and necessary to link the Palestinian political prisoners struggle with the daily and exist struggle in Europe or elsewhere as well.
Thank you, Mohammed. Yasmin, do you want to follow up on that question regarding what we can do here in the Netherlands for the release of Palestinian prisoners?
Yeah, I think that Mohammed gave quite a good answer, but I think that there, like, just on top of that, there are always I mean, yeah, I don't think that the government of the Netherlands will do much, but ever for the Palestinian prisoners. But I think that you can also always think of like, for example, if they're like now there's a lot of like student prisoners. So maybe with your student association, you can do a letter, like writing letters and building these like getting more people aware of what's happening there, and then building relations. And just in general, in terms of like releasing prisoners, I think Mohammed was talking about connecting it with different like things, but there's also like quite a strong like abolitionist, like prison abolitionist movement, which I think that the issue of political prisoners can be like also talked about in those spaces and in that framework, because prisons are obsolete and they're inhumane for anyone. So I think you can also tie it with the bigger campaigns of like abolishing prisons altogether.
And if I add something to that, in my opinion, there is political prisoners because there is resistance. right? So political prisoners will always exist. It's not something that, oh, it's catastrophe, we have political prisoners. What's going on today, we have kids who are kidnapped and arrested as a political prisoners. And this is something is not just accepted, but something that it's unbelievable, right? And the fascist state of Israel is doing this because also they are not receiving a serious or paying serious consequences into this, not on a public level and social level, that there is a huge protesting and movement around the globe saying, oh, stop, you cannot do this shit. This is illegal. This is unhumane, blah, blah, blah. But also they are not facing any other form of resistance of this. And I think this is what should happen and must be happening, because this is the only way to stop the state of Israel is doing this, because this is a matter of confrontation with the resistance, which is always exist. But also in another point, when we always could talk about political prisoners, not because they are a bunch of people who are suffering and living in an inhumane situation and we have to liberate them to live a better condition. For us, political prisoners is the leaders of our movement. They are the political leaders, the serious leaders who are leading the daily confrontation with the Israeli, with the Zionist state, starting from their cell, directly from behind the bars. So this is what we advocate for, is putting the lights of these political prisoners when we focus on the youth and the students, political prisoners, because we believe after their liberation, which will happen, that they are the one who is capable and who will be mostly leading our national liberation movement for liberation and return and to end with this colonialism. So I do believe also it's very important to think or to think together about how we can appraise the political prisoners in this way, that they are our leadership of the movement, and not go with this international human right victimizing political prisoners and calling for better rights, and as it's only a problem that they only make one phone call a week and they have to do two. So I think the liberation of political prisoners must be there always as the leaders of the movement who are paying the most expensive price, which is their life.
Yes, thank you, Mohammed, for that additional point. We are getting quite some questions in the chat, and I also have some other questions. So maybe I'm very please keep them coming, the question, and sorry if we in the end will not be able to answer them all, but I think it's a very relevant question that Daniel from Within Our Lifetime asked. Because in the US, material support laws prevent the making of connections and supporting resistance movements in Palestine and around the world without fear of criminalization. So he's asking what our thoughts are on the situation in the US and for people in the US who strive to make these kind of connections and build solidarity with revolutions around the world that maybe have to do it in different ways outside the US.
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of laws that, like, I know that you were saying about the new one that came in a new EU law, like that came in the past year, that is also making it harder to get funding, or if depending on who you work with, because of these terror lists and stuff, which I recently discovered only came into the EU only had a terror list since 9/11. Before that, they had very confuddled counterterrorism. But I mean, I think that you can always make connections with people, because I think it depends on what type of a connection. Are you trying to give financial support, or are you just trying to make, you can always make connections by, I mean, okay, so the one thing I want to say in response to this as well is that in the past years we've also seen a lot more blacklisting and trying to get people to not go to Palestine, trying to make it be dangerous for activists to go. And in the US, you also have the Canary Mission website, which is really horrible. But you know, it still is possible for a lot of people to go. Like, it still is, and like, I think going there is the best way to make connections with people, and like, also then you can figure out ways of making those connections last. Yeah, I think my.
Can I say something into this?
Please.
Go ahead.
I think it's a very important question, because the situation in the United States is quite different from Europe. And I do believe that the legal system and criminalizing resistance and solidarity movement in the United States is much more than Europe. And it's almost to the level that what the Zionist state will respond on people's movement. So they can arrest you forever, they can detain you without lawyer, and they have many forms in the US if there is any material support of resistance. This is what I agree. But in the same time, building a relation and direct relation and international solidarity movement, as Yasmin explained, this shouldn't be always material. For example, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine never published a statement said, we call the revolutionary movements around the world to give us money. Never. I mean, the Front, for example, or other Palestinian political organizations, they used to support political and revolutionary organizations around the world with material support. The Palestinian resistance never called for this, especially from our comrades and friends in the North and the West, and who live under colonialism. But we called for a direct relationship with the institutions the resistance has. With institutions, with the Palestinian social movement, and also with the national liberation movement in general, because the Palestinian national liberation movement is not only the resistance political organization, it's wider than that. It's with the study institutions, it's with the youth institutions, it's with the cultural and music bands, and all of those people, we see them as a part of our national liberation movement. And there, if there is any repression, here comes the resistance and the confrontation, because always we expect that there will be repression. But here comes the question of, does we will fight back? So for example, if we take the example of the Black Panthers who went to Jordan and to Lebanon to have trainings with the People's Front, armed trainings, of course they thought about the consequences of when they go back, they will get arrested from the United States. But also their commitment and their level of confrontation and seeing the relation and their role into this was much wider. And that's why they are significant. And that's why they are political leaders, and that's why they get assassinated, and that's why they became political prisoners, because they were building this culture of resistance. And they proved that by building this by blood. We have many Palestinians who get assassinated here in Brussels, in the municipality where I live, really few streets from here. And Naim Khadr, a Palestinian leader, he was a students leader in the beginning, and he became a political leader representing the first representative of the PLO in the best era of the PLO. He was assassinated by the Mossad openly in Brussels. Another Palestinian leader, Majid Abu Sharara, because he was building this direct relationship with revolutionary organizations, he was assassinated in Rome. So, and in Athens, you have this, and some of them also was arrested and deported, and blah, blah, blah. Of course, there will be always a confrontation with this, and I think this is where comes the revolutionary organizations, and otherwise we are very similar to any NGO or human rights organization. I mean, so I think there will be always this confrontation and price and fight back, and yes.
Thank you both, Yasmin and Mohammed. I just want to move to a question by Sorcha Thompson, asked in the chat, which I think also relates to the answers that you both gave now, and that is how we can facilitate the intergenerational learning between the traditions of struggles of the revolutionary movements in the 60s, 70s, and how we now today as a new generation, a young generation as well, I think, you know, when I look to the people who are in this chat, most of us are young people now. So I think like this question is very relevant. And Mohammed, you mentioned a bit with the Black Panthers and the, the old PLO representatives, like how can we facilitate active learning from these past movements and incorporate the lessons in our own work?
Well, if I might jump in for one, I don't think it's going to happen on Zoom for one, but I think that in these in the passing of like knowledge, you have to be together. I think physically is and then that's something that we're actually like struggling with in these weeks. But once all of this is over, I think that I mean I have experienced intergenerational organizing in feminist settings, and I think I don't have any ideas of how we can facilitate it, except that I know that, like, for example, we have quite a large Filipino community here, and we have been in discussions about like working with them and doing workshops and different sharing sessions, and I think the like sitting down together over a nice meal and having a good story time is one of the simplest, easiest ways. If you have access to these, if that your community is made up of young and old people, to just bring them together in those kind of settings and share these important stories is I guess the first step to starting to think about how we can actually do this more concretely. I don't know if you have anything, or Mohammed wants to say anything, or maybe
I do.
it's a good question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mohammed.
I think because we always mention the 60s, 70s, 80s, but I think we should study it again. Not to copy paste it and to apply it, but to know from where we can build and go forward, because it's connected. Any work of action we are taking or trying to do, it's building on this movement that we are part of its history, and our significant role is to the change and the renewal from within that we can do for the future and for looking forward. So I think first studying and learning from these revolutionary organizations and international solidarity relations, it's very important. And I do believe also one of the lacks that we are facing today, and one of the things that we lost, is the institutions who are able to study and to review and to write and to teach and to open this space for people who can learn, but not only for the purpose of research and learning, but to be able to think more from where we can go forward, which I think can be the cadre school, can be summer schools, can be in many different ways and forms. But I think studying our history and will allow us a lot for planning for any future, or to see even where we stand today and why. Thank you.
Thank you again, both of you. I just think we can move on to a bit rounding up also of the evening, but we have some questions left, and maybe this is more for Mohammed, but I also want to ask Yasmin to think what she has to share of this, and it's from Arun from the Communist Party of India, Marxist-Leninist, and he is asking to maybe answer the question how we can build a global working class movement and strengthen this for the Palestinian struggle. But I think maybe more important also to shine a bit of a light. Please don't give a whole dissertation on this issue, but a bit shine a light on the working class movements and working class parties right now in Palestine. And I think it's good also for other people to hear about this, because also within the Netherlands, like, of course, when we talk about the Palestinian parties, the only message that we hear in the media, this is Hamas. And you have a bit of Palestinian Authority, and you know something about Fatah from the, from the past, about Yasser Arafat. But the mainstream media, of course, here, they talk a lot about Palestine, but we don't actually know about the political parties that exist in Palestine and that actually have a big influence, of course, on the Palestinian society. So I don't know, Mohammed, if you want to specifically answer this, and Yasmin, maybe you also want to shine your light on this question.
I think building a relationship directly with Palestinian trade unions and other organizations and institutions who are working on workers' questions. This is very important. I agree with Thomas. Yes, this is what we see in the mainstream media about Palestinian political parties. That it's mostly Hamas and also Fatah and the PA. But I do believe also within the solidarity movement and the social movements in the Netherlands or even in India or elsewhere, we know also that there is other Palestinian political parties, because there used to be and there's still some direct relationship with this organization. It's not like those organizations are aliens and no one knows that they are something. Their first leadership are, for example, if we take the PFLP, we see even the leadership and half of the other central committee with this general secretary, they are in the Israeli jails for tens of years. So I think they are well known, and also our role more is to focus on the left movement within the Palestinian National Liberation Movement. And I think also this is part of the question today. For example, within the solidarity movement and international solidarity movement and its wider form, let's say, we have the BDS, right? And BDS is calling for boycott and divestments on Israel because of their criminality. But on the other hand, I do believe that what solidarity movement have to do, and also the Palestinian communities in diaspora and all around the world, it's not just calling for boycotting the Zionist state of Israel, but calling and struggling for the normalization with Palestinian resistance. Because the resistance in Palestine, of course, is not something criminal, but also it's illegal by international law, even the one that I do not believe on. So people's right of resistance for national liberation and for independence is protected, and this is not criminal. If any state or any court will criminalize any activist or any movement for working on this or supporting this, here is what we spoke about. This is part of the confrontation, and this is where let's say the movement in the Netherlands have to say to the government, no, you cannot do this, because also this is part of freedom of speech. This is part of our opinions. This is part of where we stand and where we see our connections with people who are under oppression. So this is what I do believe, that there is very big necessity today, especially in Europe, with the new laws that attacking BDS, attacking Palestinian voices, such what happened, for example, with Comrade Khalid Barakat. He was, as he was deported from Germany and wasn't allowed to come back for 4 years. And what is the reasons, for example, that German authority and the secret police office, whatever they call it, they said because Khalid doesn't believe in the right of state of Israel to exist. I do not believe in the right of state of Israel to that. This doesn't mean I should leave Belgium or go somewhere else. This is my opinion. What the German court or the Belgian court had to do with what I'm thinking in my mind. So this oppression against Palestinians is part of the siege on our people that we live in. The siege on Gaza is part of this. The siege and the wall in West Bank is part of this. The prisoners in these prisons from the north to the south of Palestine is for this. It doesn't allowing Palestinians in Lebanon to travel and to deprive them from their basics right, even from right to work in Lebanon. This is part of this. Giving negative on Palestinian asylum seekers in Europe. This is for the sake of more isolating the Palestinians. So I think the role of the solidarity movement in its wider form, and also for revolutionary organization, is to build direct relations with Palestinian communities in Europe who live within us, and we are facing the same.
Mohammed, are you still there?
We are talking about important part of our people, tens or hundreds of thousands, that they are not allowed to work by law. So they are not even recognized as a working class because they don't have right to work. So where we stand with those people? We have Palestinians who live in Europe today who are not recognized as workers. They don't have right to work. So I agree focusing on working class is very important, especially for our people in Palestine who are working inside Israel, especially, and are abused and used as a cheap labor domestic workers. They need big support, especially from the history and the existence trade unions in Europe and workers movement and in the United States and in India and all over the world, because it's one movement, working class movement. So, yes.
Thank you, Mohammed. I want to move on actually to a last question, and I want to ask you to both answer it with the last ideas you have, and maybe reiterate some of the points that you both made earlier this evening. And I just want to ask you, how do you think we can move forward in the current times, in which I think we can see that among the youth, actually in the whole world, I think, we see a new progressive and revolutionary movement that is standing up. We see large-scale protests in Europe, in the Middle East, in the US, in South America. We see everywhere movements happening around environment, around specific issues. I think right now the feminist movement, this is becoming a very big issue, and it's becoming even a mainstream issue for the enemies to counter these movements. And I want to ask you to reflect a bit about the possibilities of the struggle of international solidarity, and how we can incorporate all these movements also together and work together, like you were saying, that all the struggles, they are one. And we want to struggle together because all of these issues, I think I can speak for the most of us, I think we want all these issues to be solved. No, we are against the sexism, against the imperialism, against the capitalism, and I want you to reflect upon the possibilities that we have right now to struggle and to broaden the movements that we are active for. Mohammed, do you want to go first?
I mean, we need to get involved, and because there's many things going on, as you mentioned. I totally agree with everything you said. How to do this? We talked about it. Like most of the event was about how it's to build the connection, the direct connection, face-to-face connection, practical programs and sharing programs and connection, learning process between different social movements and organizations. But I think in an individual and personal level, it's mostly get involved within your community, yourself, get involved in the social questions. Today, all of our humanity is facing, for example, this virus. How we can protect our community, how we can be involved more on the things that our analysis regarding of the state capacity and the state response, and how the people respond on this. How we in this kind of, let's say, advanced societies and classes, and who live in the imperialist society, and we are living even with this virus that we see states has no capacity, even within the so-called developed states, how medical system is failure, how states is failure. So here it comes our serious direct relation with the people, with the questions that our community and our people around in our neighborhood is living every day, and to build this connection from our neighborhood to Palestine, from our neighborhood to India, to the Philippines. Because also, if we say in the Netherlands, I don't think all the Dutch people is interested in what you are talking about, because it's not in the interest of their class situation, it's not in the interest of in the business and the way of living they have. So we have to see also who is our alliance and who is our comrades and brothers and sisters within this society, that we are facing the same oppression, we are facing the same or in a different practice, but and different faces, but the same enemy. So how we can build this? I think it's a very simple question, because many things already exist and does it do exist. I think it's more on a matter of how much we as individuals, as organizations want to get involved and really work on ourselves more and more.
Thanks, Mohammed. Yeah, if I'm gonna say what I think, and we also just got a message here, just throwing in the idea of a topic that really binds us all, and to build a global campaign around that. And I was already thinking before this comment came in of the big struggles that the resistance struggles, the people struggles that we've seen really come up have been environmental struggle and indigenous people struggle. And I think that these two are both just so connected to each other, because it's about like a ruling power's relationship to land, and that like people land. It kind of, these two, the crossover of environment and indigenous struggle really brings us back to like the fact that, well, it brings me back to the fact that scientists say we have 12 years to reduce climate change drastically, or yeah, humans are going to really be badly affected. The planet will be fine if we go extinct, it will thrive. But I do think that like we need to like be able to convince people that they deserve so much better than what they have, because they don't, like this whole wage labor, exploitation, terrible working conditions, being coded to be a consumer and not really enjoying life as a human. I mean, we deserve better, and I think that it would be great to come up with more imaginative ways to wake people up from the consumerist fugue that we've been in for like over 100 years, and to realize that actually we are all equal, because we are all just humans, and we have many differences, but we're the same at the same time. I think just teaching that, and I have a lot of hope in Gen Z. I mean, I think the kids are going to be all right. I also know that the reality is that we're also seeing rising fascism in many places, and the impending economic crisis will only make the situation worse, but it only makes more fertile ground for revolutionary thinking and the imperative to change things. So I really think that just awakening people to realize that they deserve better, and they can organize, and they can grasp that, and we can, but only with international solidarity.
I want to add something as well about the question of the youth. As Thomas said, that there is all internationally a youth movement. It's around the globe. I agree, but I think also this youth movement, it's always exist and it's always there. But also I think we have to, it's a little bit sensitive when we say youth in general, because also not all youth are together, and not all youth are the same, and not all youth have the same, they are coming from same class and they have the same interest. So I agree, youth as a generation, it's very important within the movement, but I think this is, we are speaking about the youth of the movement. No, we're not speaking about the youth in general. We have to work as a revolutionary left and within the movement to recruit from the youth to be more involved in the movement and to play their role as a progressive power within our society. Where is the youth? The youth is not acting as a movement by their own and as a youth, and this is their definition or where they stand within the national liberation movement. There is today a movement in Palestine, for example, feminist movement called Tali'at, working on women and other oppressed communities. So this movement, it's led and run by Palestinian youth. But this Palestinian youth is a progressive youth and not on the sides of the Palestinian Authority or colonialism, for example. Students' union, students today or youth in Palestine are leading the students' movement who are confronting Zionist occupation every day, especially, for example, let's say in West Bank. Youth in Gaza, they are the leaders of the armed resistance. They are the ones who have been marching for 2 years as a naked only with their bodies facing the Israeli brutal army, and many get injured, tens of thousands was injured and assassinated. This is where the Palestinian youth today, and I think many other youth around the world who are facing the same repression, they are part of this international confrontation. Of course, I agree with Yasmin about our classes and how we should convince our people that they deserve better. But I think also we are in a time today that there is also lower classes from the classes that we need to convince them today to accept that they deserve better, that the people who know that they deserve something and they don't even have it, and they are trying and struggling every day for at least minimum basics, things of life, like basic medical care, basics electricity, basics water without salts, for example. And I think the role of the youth movement, the role of solidarity movement in the West and so-called developed societies to, to, to see their capacities and how, like clearly, how we can use our privilege to support other national liberations movement around the world. Because I do believe that in the West, we are privileged enough to give, to play our serious role in supporting the liberations movement, that they are paying the price of oppression for us to have this kind of development. And I think this is unfair. So as a Palestinian refugee, for example, who come from this world, I have been in Europe since almost 10 years. Every day in my life, every single act of development I see in Europe, I do believe that I have this feeling that this is from our blood. Not only as Palestinians, from all oppressed people and countries who are stolen by capitalism and colonialism until today. There is, for example, now, if we speak about practical solidarity, I just want to end with this. With coronavirus, there is a campaigns to support our refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan and elsewhere, especially the isolated communities within our Palestinian society. The camps in Lebanon are not receiving serious care and aid from the Palestinian Authority because first, our people in Lebanon are not living under their authority, but also second, because this authority have no political and serious interest to support our people because they are not also with the right of, they are not on the front of right of return. So I think there is a campaign, we can share it with you, or maybe Thomas can send it around by email to donate for refugee camps in Lebanon and progressive institutions in Lebanon who are working in the refugee camps, but in the same time refusing to take any international aid with demands such as the EU aid. So I think also it's our role to support this independent, progressive grassroots organizations working and supporting our poorest and oppressed communities. And in the same time, they are fighting in the front of funding and the demands from the EU and terrorizing international organizations. And the last word I want to end, because thank you for allowing me to talk a lot. Support the resistance. Don't be hesitated to support the resistance. Don't be hesitated to support the people who are giving their blood in Palestine and sacrificing just to exist. Supporting the armed resistance movement is something legally, and it's something we shouldn't be hesitating to support, because armed resistance movement is protecting our people from the colonial machine that it's built in Europe. So I think there is a big role on us to support the resistance in general, without hesitating and being part of this resistance. And this support this is what we allowed us to be part of the resistance, and this is where we became equal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. I guess, do you want to follow up on that or finish?
No, thank you. That was, yeah,
A good ending for tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then I want to thank everyone who was here tonight, who participated, who asked questions. I want to thank, of course, Mohammed Khabtib from Samidoun Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network. Thank you so much. I want to thank Yasmin Ahmed from Revolutionaire Einheid and the IOPS. I want to also have a couple of calls for things that are coming up. So to reiterate what Mohammed said, please go to the Samidoun website or social media, or those of the Palestinian youth movement, to find out about the campaign to support the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. This is a very important campaign, especially in these times of COVID-19. And it will be great if we can have an international effort to support this campaign. Next to that, tomorrow there will be an Arabic-speaking webinar from Occupied Palestine, Freedom for Political Prisoners in Arab Jails. It will be at the same time as this one, so that is 7:30 in Europe time. You can find more information about this webinar on the website or social media of Samidoun as well. And then Revolutionaire Einheid will organize on Monday our next webinar, which will be a report back from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So one of our comrades went to the DPRK last year, and he will give a report back on that trip to give you a bit more insight about what's happening in the DPRK, besides what you see in all the mainstream news, of course. So I think I want to end it right there. The DPRK report back will be in English. Yes, I see that asked in the chat. Thank you all so much for joining. I will also put the events that I just mentioned in the email that I will send after this webinar. So you will just be one click away from them. Thank you again for everyone being here. I hope to see you all again in the struggle somewhere. I'm sure we all meet each other again. Thank you very much for joining tonight.
Shukran. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a nice evening or morning or night, wherever you are.